Okay, it's Wednesday. It's midweek. It's time for the RealAg After Show. Let's go. Welcome to the RealAg Radio After Show. I'm your host, Shaun Haney. Thanks a lot for being here with us. It is Wednesday. It's hump day. It's the middle of the week, and there is lots to discuss. Today, we brought in, because we have had basically a significant, 2-3 weeks of a real downtrend in the markets. And so what we did is we brought in the heavy hitter, the big dog himself. It is Arlen Suderman of StoneX. And Arlen is always full of fantastic insight, especially when there's an overlay of geopolitical issues and the direction of the market. And let me tell you, he really, I thought, did a good job of describing what's going on here. And it leads to a couple things. One is being in a defensive marketing position at this point. We don't know where the bottom is of this market. We continue to hear this from a lot of the analysts. And Arlen put it really in terms of the how we're getting here, the why of all of this. And it really all comes down to, as he said, we are seeing significant trading out of things like computers and people that are in and out of this market, basically the speculators, the people that we love them when they create momentum to push the market higher. And we just scold them and cuss at them when they push the market to the downside. And Arlen brought up some really good points in terms of be defensive but patient. But if we don't know kind of where we're going to go here because of that momentum, don't be caught in a position where you're like, well, you know what, corn should be $7 and it's $5.50, and so I'm not selling. And make sure that we're paying attention to all of this, because the fundamentals drive the market, but there is that fear and emotion as well. It was interesting. He talked about how fear really drove us to the upside. And that fear was centered around, obviously, at least January, February, the war in Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine created a lot of fear, a fear about the supply side. Well, even though our hearts and our minds are still thinking about that situation, and especially the people that are in Ukraine defending their country, the market is somewhat bored of that story. And so he said, we've essentially lost all of that Russia war premium that was in the market, and it's unwarranted. But at the end of the day, based on the mood of the market here as we sit today on July 6th, that really doesn't matter. So really, really good stuff there, I thought, today from Arlen Suderman of StoneX. Let me know what you think. We are live here, of course, on the RealAg Radio After Show. So always appreciate your commentary, your thoughts, your questions, your opinions. I got to show you a tweet that, because some of you will not appreciate this and some of you will appreciate it. I got a tweet here during the show from a listener. We had just talked to Steve Pratt. He is the manager of transportation and biofuel policy with the Canadian Canola Growers Association, talking about how the CFR, the Clean Fuel Regulation, and what it's trying to do in terms of lowering the carbon intensity of fuel. And here is what he said. Here's the text I got. This is from Ange. And she says, "Get our famous leader of our country to shut his pie hole and greenhouse gases will go down by 99%. That seems to be a rather aggressive calculation, but I get Ange's point there for sure. So I thought I'd share that. I thought maybe some of you would enjoy that. Got some notes here from Jeff, who is he's going back to yesterday. And yesterday we talked to Garner Diebold from the Saskatchewan Stockgrowers Association, they are asking the federal government to investigate meat prices. Jeff says, just on yesterday's show, Shaun commented about Saskatchewan stock growers saying grain farmers have protection with the MRE. I disagree. The MRE is renewed yearly to reflect costs, and the railroads make the most revenue from grain movement from all the commodities they handle. They make the most revenue from grain movement from all of the commodities they handle. I thought it was a little bit of an interesting stretch. Like at 100,000 feet, I know why Garner made that comparison, but getting into the details, and maybe Jeff, kind of what you're alluding to here, maybe it's not a good cross comparison in terms of what they would like to see. I believe that the transparency component of all of this, transparency when it comes to the grain market, transparency when it comes to the situation in meat, as an example, I agree. There has to be more transparency. And just because there is an oligopoly in place should not be the reason there's no transparency. And so when we hear the meat packer, and picking on them for a second, if we hear them say, well, we can't have a Canadian box beef price, or we can't disclose those prices because our competition will know what we're doing. So, but the more important fact here is the farmer needs to know, the rancher, the feeder, they're the ones that benefit the most from that. Whatever. Between the two of you, I think the same thing is the case in the grain market. I think there is when you look across the border and you see the volume of reporting that is provided to the marketplace, and we report on this stuff. So I get the releases from USDA, and I'm frequently saying, I wish we had this level of reporting. We should have this. Canada is a much smaller country. I realize that. It's a 10 times factor. It's noted. I get it. It makes sense, but it doesn't. That should not be the argument against transparency. And we continue to hear think about during the Grain Act review, there was calls for more transparency. During the pandemic, there was calls for more transparency, and it's continually being argued against as if it would be a bad thing for competition. I just don't see that. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's a broader picture that somebody will explain to me and could explain to me. And I would very, very much welcome that that information, because it's one of those things where I really don't think that it's real. That's just the way I believe that. I think there needs to be more transparency. More information is good for all stakeholders. One of the other things that we saw today, I'm just pulling it up here, so just bear with me, is we didn't get to this on the show today. Actually, I'm going to wait and get to that in a second. We talked to Steve Pratt from the canola growers of the Canadian Canola Growers Association. And this is really interesting because we have a poll up at RealAgriculture.com asking you if you think the CFR, the Clean Fuel Regulations, if that's a net positive for your farm. When I appear on RFD TV and Rural Radio and Agri-Talk in the U.S., very pro biofuel. Now there are some farmers that don't think biofuels are a good thing, but for the most part, pro biofuel. If I was on Agri-Talk and if I was anti biofuel, I would hear it crazily from the audience. They would be all over me. Okay, it has not been that way in Canada. For the most part. And there probably is, and this is maybe something that Real Agri Studies we should look into in terms of people's sentiment and opinions on biofuels. That's something I should be writing down and we should be doing. But it's not as ingrained in people. Now, Canadian farmers have benefited substantially from the RFS in the United States. Look what it's done for demand for corn, which has lifted the overall market. So we have benefited on top of the currency exchange that we get. So while the industry, the Canola Council, the CCGA, while they are very celebratory about the context and the possible broad sweeping impact of the CFR, I'm not getting that sense from farmers. I'm not hearing a lot of cheerleading and thank yous and this is great. I am hearing a lot of caution. Now, I don't know if that is because it's coming from a government that, broadly they don't support, and there's a lack of trust in terms of what the legislation will look like and what these regulations really mean for agriculture. Like, if it was Stephen Harper that passed this, would the mood be different in the room? And are people being clouded by who is bringing this policy forward? That's a possibility. I don't know. One of the pieces that I hear a lot is that people are concerned, and that's why I always ask. I asked Andrea Kent from Renewable Industries Canada on Friday's show. I asked Steve Pratt today from CCGA, will this lead to higher fuel prices? Is this, as that story was in the National Post going back over a year ago, is this essentially a second carbon tax on farmers and consumers? Steve was a little bit, Andrea said no from RI Canada. Steve was a little bit more, I wouldn't call it wishy-washy, but we don't know. We don't know. We really don't have a firm understanding of what this means for the price of fuel going forward. Will there be an impact? Yes. To what extent? Undetermined at this point. The same goes for the demand standpoint, as Steve outlined it. He talked about how, when you compare the CFR to the RFS in the U.S., there is like a volume obligation when it comes to the RFS in the U.S. And so, therefore, you can work that back to what this would mean for increased canola usage for biofuels. In this case, there's more flexibility built into the fact that we're trying to reduce the carbon intensity of the fuel. But we know this. Energy companies and the canola crushers, grain companies, are investing hundreds of millions of dollars. So clearly, they see a path here where this means increased demand for canola. Okay? This increase, or this planned increase in investment in domestic canola crushing capacity, is happening in parallel to the CFR. So to suggest that no, they're basing this on like canola, based on crush margins and the opportunity, hogwash. It's all packaged together. Like just talk to them about it. They'll tell, if you believe that they're not attached, talk to them, because they will tell you otherwise. Okay? So continue to send us your feedback on how you feel about this CFR, this clean fuel regulations. We got a lot of stuff on the website about it on realagriculture.com, and encourage you to continue to let us know as we try to work through what all this means for the industry. I wanted to get with you today. Let's look here. Oh, there's a lot of good stuff we covered today. Okay, so here's a concerning piece of information. It led the news today, and that is that, make that a little bit bigger. There you go. A new study shows Canadian farmer mental health is continuing to deteriorate with a variety of factors, including rising input costs and the COVID-19 pandemic, adding to the woes. The mental health of farmers is worse than it was 5 years ago, and worse than that of the general population in almost every way. According to the survey from researchers at the University of Guelph's Ontario Veterinary College, stress, anxiety, depression, emotional exhaustion, and cynicism which are noted as two components of burnout, suicide ideation, and lowered resilience were all higher among farmers than the national average, the research found. Very I want to read more into this because there's a lot of ways to go with this. Andrea Jones-Bitton conducted the study. Jones-Bitton, along with postdoctoral researcher Brianna Hagen and Master's of Science student Rochelle Thompson, analyzed the responses of nearly 1,200 Canadian farmers who completed an online version of the survey of farmer mental health in Canada between February and May of 2021. The research found that 76% of farmers said they were currently experiencing moderate or high perceived stress. That goes back to 2021. 2021 was a pretty... Now, we got to segment this out. This makes a lot of sense to me when it comes to the livestock producer. Higher feed costs, big time issues on negative margins. We had a drought in Western Canada. We also had a drought in Western Canada when it comes to grain farmers too, so I got to be careful there. Eastern Canadian farmers, high prices, record yields on beans and corn in Ontario. So it'd be really interesting to look at some of the demographic data to this and the separation east-west, type of farm, maybe size of farm. But regardless of that, very concerning, and maybe the most interesting is this comment here about worse than that of the general population. What is the why of that? And one of the comments here was, there's no sick note for farmers. You don't get paid if you don't work. The lack of control is very frustrating. Lack of control with respect to the weather, input costs, and commodity prices are very stressful as well. So, yeah, that's something to be paying attention to for absolutely for sure. There was something else I wanted to show you here. Get to it. This were whatever. Here it is. And we talked about us losing farmland a couple weeks ago here. We had a really, really great discussion about that. And we kind of had to hurry through the end of the news today on the show. But farmland has been dwindling over the past 2 decades. Nearly 247,000 farms were part of the national agricultural landscape in 2001. Now that total falls just under 190,000. Other numbers from the University of Guelph's Department of Rural Development and Planning say every year 50,000 acres of farmland disappear in Canada because of urban expansion. So as the statistics show, then they use the example of the Heppels, their situation is not unique, and many experts have said it's time for the federal government to work with provinces and territories to establish an overarching strategy to preserve farmland across the country. I watch with extreme interest on what this looks like. Is there regional differences to some sort of overarching policy? Put this policy in the hands of the wrong person. I'm talking about the creation of this. Okay. If we're going to do this, let's make sure the entire, the commercial farming sector is a part of it, and not just a small little sliver, as we seem to be doing here on a number of fronts. Tied to this is the fact that, Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, or one of the founders of Microsoft, continues to buy up U.S. farmland. He's the largest farmland owner in the United States. The North Dakota State Attorney General concluded that the sale of roughly 2,100 acres of farmland to a group tied to billionaire Bill Gates, the largest private owner of U.S. farmland, complies with state law, which is against corporate farming. So the land purchase is a go-ahead. I am sure there's probably lots of people asking, if Bill Gates doesn't qualify as a corporate farm, who the hell is a corporate farm in North Dakota? Just saying. Also, we have a story at realagriculture.com that Saskatchewan land is a seller's market. and prices are strong. Great interview that Brittany Warner of Real Agriculture did with June Dako and Ray Norden. They're real estate agents with Remax Bridge City Realty. They say they've seen a fairly significant decline in available parcels for sale over the past couple of years throughout the province, something they are attributing to the consolidation of smaller farming operation. So yeah, like this is the problem. We're upset about urbanization, okay, as an industry, and I get that. We should be. Like, if we're not allowed to take down forested areas to make new farmland, then what are we doing on the other end? We're like a candle burning at both ends. If we've got land being paved and we can't take down trees to make more, we're going to have less net at the end of every single year. So that urbanization, though, let's be really honest, is a lot of people's exit strategy. And in a very, very good exit strategy. So if you're farming up against the city of Mississauga or whatever, large city, take Calgary. If you're farming up against that, Red Deer, right? If you're farming up against that, getting annexed, let's be honest, is pretty good financially. Generational wealth. There is selling farmland at high prices for farmland, and then they're selling farmland to a city. Those are different things. Those are different financial quadrants. And so this is a topic that some people don't like discussed. They don't like it discussed because urbanization raises the value, the tide of farmland values. And so, like, frequently when we discuss this, so people get really pissed off. They get mad. They send angry messages because it's sort of like, don't discuss this. Now, is there a growing interest? Maybe in Saskatchewan, is urbanization a real problem? No. Is urbanization a problem in North Dakota? No. For the most part. Montana, no. But it is in other areas. Southwestern Ontario, you bet your bottom dollar it is. It's a huge problem. It's a huge concern. And so in certain regions, there's a justification for an overarching policy on land use and urbanization, but not in all jurisdictions. And so to create something national, oh boy, have fun with that. Good luck. Best of luck to you. I am not volunteering. and I'm sure many of you know what was, as they call it, a bit of a sticky wicket. It is one that would not be very fun to try to coordinate and sort of figure out. But at a time where we are so concerned, and when I'm saying the general we is concerned about food shortages and food security, we have no problem building that next IKEA or that next Costco or that next subdivision. No, that's fine. We're good. But we're not connecting dots. I appreciate you bringing this up, Canadian Cow Man. BC has what's called the Agricultural Land Reserve, the ALR, only can be used for farm activities. Very difficult to get out of ALR for subdivision. Isn't there another kind of controversial rule to that that's tied to that where you can only have one farmhouse on a given, I think on a certain unit of land? And so where if you had people trying to build multiple farmhouses on the family farm can't do so. Canadian Cowman, help me out there. I'm pretty sure there is something there. So Canadian Cowman, is the ALR policy, is that looked upon positively amongst farmers? Like, you're in the Fraser Valley, so you face this kind of pressure all the time. Is it viewed positively by farmers in the area? Let me know about that. Now I got to stay. Now I got to stay here on the air so he responds. Got to stay here. Speaking of the markets and what we saw here today, kind of refreshing. It was nice to see that I don't know if we stopped the bleeding, but we've at least gave it reason to pause today. Yeesh, it has been it's been ugly. Let's see here. Here's what we saw today. I'm waiting for Canadian Cowman to get back to me how they feel about it. Building a second residence can be a challenge. There's ways around it. A mobile home. Okay, well, that's. Why don't we just change there's an example of it's like unintended consequences of some policy. How is it viewed by farmers though? Do farmers view the ALR positively? We'll wait for him to get back on to us on that. Markets today, what we saw is, like I said, not a recovery, but at least the screen wasn't just like an all-out bloodbath like it has been here for the past while. We saw corn in the near months. It was up anywhere from 6.25 to 7.5. We saw soybeans as well on the green side, barely. Chicago wheat down 2.5 to 804.5 in September. We saw hard red wheat in the September contract down 10.5, down to 851.5, where the December contract is 860 down 10.5. Spring wheat down barely, anywhere from 3.75 to 4.5 in the September and December contracts, and canola just down slightly in both July and November. So really kind of essentially not a ho-hum day. I think it's a bit of a refreshing day based on what we have seen here the past few days. So I think we'll take it. Encourage you to, in case you missed it, the conversation with Arlen Suderman from StoneX will be posted at realagriculture.com tonight. You can also, of course, download RealAg Radio wherever you get your podcasts and hear that interview. Arlen, full of some great information. In regards to the ALR, Canadian Cowman says, I believe farmers view as a good thing. So what that is BC has what's called an agricultural land reserve. It can only be used for farming activities, designated land. Very difficult, as he says, to get a subdivision approval. So, there is that. So maybe that's something we see in other parts of Canada. Huge pressure in the Fraser Valley, right? Huge pressure in places like the Okanagan Valley around Kelowna, for sure. Not as much in places like the Kootenay Valley in BC, but this is something that people are starting to talk about. And of course, like everything, appreciate your thoughts on all of it. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or of course, you can always find us on social media, wherever you like to hang out in that regard. Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in today. Don't forget, tomorrow, Farmer Rapid Fire. We'll talk to 4 farmers from across the country. We got 2 Ontario, a Manitoba, and Alberta farmer. So we'll have lots to discuss with them as well tomorrow on the show. And I've got a big question for them, really hard hitting. What is your favorite small town, rural, hole in the wall pub or tavern? Where is the burger good, the pizza's good, and the beer's cold, and even better, it's the people that you want to hang out with? Let us know, because we're trying to collect them all week, and on Friday's show we'll talk about some of them. So please send those to me. shaney@realagriculture.com is the email. Hey, that's enough for today. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. All the best to you, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.